Hi, and welcome to the Right to Remain Silent podcast. I'm Jim Weber, your host and guide through actual accounts of intriguing and fascinating true crime stories as told by the law enforcement professional that experienced the event. The Right to Remain Silent podcast makes no exaggeration of fact, doesn't glamorize details, or sensationalize reality. The format here is basic. Real stories from real cops. Lastly, please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Doing this will help me continue to provide you, the listener, with captivating and relevant true crime stories. Now, let's listen in on today's episode. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Right to Remain Silent True Crime Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Weber, and today's guest is Austin Barrett, a Division I student athlete at Iowa State University, where he balances the demands of college football as an offensive lineman while pursuing a degree in criminal justice. And today, Austin's going to share his experiences and thoughts as a criminal justice student and his vision for life after football, which is a future career in law enforcement. And I think today's conversation, Austin offers a unique perspective from someone preparing to join the next generation of law enforcement. On the Right to Remain Silent podcast here, we typically speak with folks that are currently in law enforcement or they've retired and had an entire career in law enforcement. But today, Austin's story is going to be incredibly interesting because he's going to be talking about preparing for that journey to get into law enforcement. So Austin, hey, welcome to the podcast, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
Jim, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this one for a while, and obviously, being able to meet you, a month or two ago, and kind of keeping up with your podcast from there. I'm fired up. So,
Good
thank you.
deal. Good deal. Absolutely. You are more than welcome. So before we kind of get into our conversation today, I thought maybe I would tell listeners a little bit about your background. Is that okay if I go ahead and do that?
Yeah, perfect.
All right, here we go. Austin is a Division I student athlete at Iowa State University, where he plays football in the Big 12 Conference while majoring in criminal justice. His commitment to excellence, both on the field and in the classroom, reflects the values of hard work, discipline, and integrity, qualities essential to both athletics as well as a future career in law enforcement. Austin was a consensus 3-star recruit out of St. Charles East High School in Illinois. Austin was ranked among the top 25 recruits in the state. He earned first team All Kane County honors as a senior and was selected to compete in the prestigious Blue-Gray All-America Bowl. In addition to football, he was recognized among the top heavyweight wrestlers in the nation by Flow Wrestling. Austin began his collegiate athletic career at Indiana University before transferring to Iowa State University, where he continues to pursue both his athletic and professional aspirations. Austin, that is an awesome background at such an early stage in your life. And I'm here to tell you there's so much more on the horizon for you.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate you having me on, and that was a very well put together introduction. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this next chapter of my career. Obviously, just getting here to Iowa State, and obviously, law enforcement is something I want to pursue for a long time. So, yeah, Jim, I appreciate it.
Good deal. Yep. Well, let's do this. Let's go ahead and kind of start off where, I just read a little bit about you, but let's hear it from you. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born, where you're from, and what growing up was like for you.
Yeah. Grew up in St. Charles, Illinois, born in Bloomingdale, Illinois, which is about a little over an hour west of Chicago. Uh, have three great brothers. Mom and dad who, my childhood was, was awesome. Playing around in the neighborhood, playing by the creek with two older brothers and one younger brother. Couldn't really ask for much better. Grew up playing football at a pretty young age. I believe I started in second grade. Playing Pee Wee, Pop Warner football from flag all the way up to tackle. And then yeah, kind of progressing through that through looking up to my two older brothers who also played football. One who plays with me here at Iowa State, who I'll talk about more in a little bit. But yeah, I played football my whole life. Uh, really enjoyed the sport. Played a bunch of sports, track and field. In high school, I got into wrestling my freshman year, along with basketball, soccer, all that stuff. I kind of did it all, which is something that was a really cool opportunity for me as a young kid, being able to compete in many sports and see what I liked, see what I didn't like, and also not you know my old man never really put the pressure on me to go play collegiately or go be the best and all these travel teams and all that stuff. I always played in house. The field we practiced and played on was like 2 blocks away from my house, over by the pool. So yeah, that's kind of how I was brought up. Sports were obviously a huge part of it, and you know, I kind of I can't stress enough how awesome it was having three brothers. There was always someone to play with, which was awesome. And kind of going into growing up, there was I think I had one of the greatest childhoods of all time, only because of how you know growing up in a neighborhood playing with your buddies was awesome. Kind of around, I would say, middle school to high school is when, I really started to kind of hone in on what I was doing. I really started to set goals as far as, aspirations for college and, thinking about a career, even though, I was super young at the time. I knew what I wanted to do. And, having, external stressors like, when I was in middle school, my seventh grade, eighth grade, my parents got a divorce. That was a huge part of my childhood and really changed the trajectory of everything because I really thought that it made me grow up pretty fast. Which, looking back on it now, it was what I needed at the time. And that really pushed me to kind of, with those goals that I set growing up, it really gave me an opportunity to lock in on those because of all the the external stressors and the things I had going on, whether that was at home or school. Growing up and being able to kind of embrace my brothers who we've always stuck together the entire time. Even when we've been put to the test, our brotherhood has always stood tall, which is something that I'm extremely grateful for. But yeah, kind of going into middle school and high school, I started wrestling my freshman year. I loved it. Well, actually, I hated it my first year. Got my tail whooped, which was not fun, but learned to get a lot better at it. My freshman year was also COVID in 2020.
Mm.
Or yeah, 2020 was my freshman year, sophomore year, which was also kind of another external stressor that I didn't see coming at all. I don't think anyone really did. But along came COVID was a lot of blessing in disguises. Being able to stay at home and still do school and progress through all that stuff was cool because we didn't, completely put the world on pause. But
Right.
being at home doing the things I loved, like hanging out with my brothers, and we got a weight set for the garage. I don't know, it was not very much weight, and it was very, very sketchy. But we did it. And me and my brothers were in there every night, staying up late, working out, doing that kind of stuff, and embracing football because that was really all that was going on. Was activities outside. So
Let
that
me
was
ask you
also
this.
yeah.
Let me ask you this. I apologize for interrupting, but I find the dynamic of your brothers, your family structure so interesting. I've had previous conversations with you and your brother, Dylan, And you guys, referenced your younger brother or the youngest brother.
Yeah.
And I think you said he's a pretty big dude as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he's about my height. I'm 6.5 feet tall. He's a fresh yeah, he's a gonna be a sophomore this upcoming year. Yeah, and he's my height. He's about, you know, built like an offensive tackle just like I am. Yeah, and with, three older brothers who kind of help lead the way and show him how it's done, I think he's gonna be, really, really, really good. And
Yeah, yeah. How
yeah,
about was there, it sounds like you guys had a great bond and I mean and have a great bond
Mhm.
still. Was there a competitive spirit as well? Like was it a competition amongst brothers or how does that dynamic work for you guys?
Yeah, yeah, it was, I kind of growing up with brothers, I really there was always something going on, always something. Whether that was a sporting event or if we had nothing to do during the summer, we're always playing outside doing something. And growing up with two older brothers, not only not only showed me how like how to act and how to be a good person and competitive and how to play sports right because we would be in the backyard working on stuff all the time. But yeah, we were competitive, like sometimes too competitive. There was a lot of roughhousing, a lot of bruises and cuts and scrapes from doing probably stuff we weren't supposed to be doing, like
Right.
throwing stuff and messing around in the basement. But that was something I will never take for granted because I know a lot of people don't have a brotherhood like that to grow up with, and it taught me not only how to kind of fend for myself sometimes when things didn't go my way, but not only did we all play the same sport, it was yeah, competitiveness flourished in my house, and my dad definitely wanted that for us for sure. We had
Yeah.
a basketball hoop in the front yard, and we rarely used it for basketball. We would be doing anything out there. So
All right. Well,
yeah,
I interrupted you when you were talking about your wrestling path, so kind
yeah,
of pick up back on that.
yeah. I started wrestling my freshman year. Didn't really get good at it until the end of my sophomore year, going into my junior year. Had a varsity spot my sophomore year. Again, got my tail handed to me a couple of times pretty well. But there was there was some sort of itch for me that wrestling let me kind of cut loose because it's not a very mental it's mental it tests your mental toughness, but it's not very it's not like football where there's 11 guys that need to be on the same page the entire time. It was just you, and it's a lot of you being able to react to certain things. And it was a very laborious sport, which I appreciated, and I thought it was kind of good for me to take wrestling and apply it to my football and vice versa. And yeah, the reason why I started wrestling was when my parents got divorced. I had no outlet. Football was something I enjoyed, but wasn't going on year round.
Right.
And come the winter, I was terrible at basketball. I might be the worst basketball player you've ever seen. I can't. I wasn't going to play that, and I wasn't going to make the high school team, stuff like that. So the wrestling coach convinced me to go out, and I eventually started making a lot of good contacts and relationships through wrestling. A lot of my wrestling coaches I talk to till this day, and they've had a tremendous impact on my life as far as getting myself up to a physical standard and a mental toughness standard of being elite at something you did, whether that's football or wrestling, or take that and apply that to any other aspect of life. But that was a definitely a turning point, going from a new coming freshman who was really was curious and didn't know what was in store for him, to where I had a good handle on what I could do and what I couldn't do and what I needed to do to get to the place that I wanted to be. And that kind of going into junior senior year, that was when I was really exposed to the world of college football. Obviously, I've had my brother at the time, my older brother. He graduated my sophomore year and played at the University of Wisconsin. And so I knew what it took to be a collegiate football player, and I knew it's something I wanted to do. And earning a scholarship somewhere was something that I thought was going to help propel me in the future. And coming out debt free of school was huge for me because, if I didn't have football, I don't think I'd be going to college. I think I'd be doing something else just because, it would be, more ideal for my situation. But, with the blessings I've had and being able to play college football, it's really been great. And like I said, my brother was a very good role model for me. And junior senior year, I got some exposure, got some offers that I really was truly interested in. And the end of my junior year, I believe I picked Indiana University down in Bloomington. And obviously right now I'm at Iowa State, and I made the transfer. Which I thought was something that I needed to do for myself. And when I'm super happy I made the decision. But I also recognize that going to Indiana was definitely something that was good for me. I still think to this day at the time that was the right decision for me. I wouldn't change it.
Sure.
And I sure learned a lot of great things there. And that's kind of going into my collegiate career. But, you know, my everything that happened up until high school and getting to college was all those experiences I don't take for granted. I certainly don't regret.
Sure. Absolutely. So it sounds like you had, a strong family dynamic. You had great guidance with coaching in high school. You had a role model of a brother that
Mhm.
transitioned from high school into collegiate sports. All these positives, in conversations that you and I have had in the past, you also referenced your faith.
Yeah,
And I think that is something that plays an important part. Me personally, I strongly believe in that. And I think that's something that I admire about athletes such as yourself is your strong internal compass when you're balancing sports like football. You're balancing that with education. You're balancing that with the pursuit of law enforcement. And faith oftentimes plays a tremendous role and keeps individuals grounded. Is that the case with you?
yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that. It certainly has been it's been my faith has been around my entire life. I grew up in the church. Going to church on Sundays and whatnot. There was times when COVID hit and my parents split, things like that. Things got super busy, and it was hard to make it out to church every Sunday. But my dad is certainly my biggest you know I would say, yeah, mentor as far as my faith goes, because he's taught me so much. And he, even when I was in middle school and elementary school, he forced me to go to Sunday school even though I didn't want to.
Yeah,
I needed it. But
yeah,
he's always looked out for me as far as things like that go. And um my journey as far as my faith goes has been really really you know really interesting. As far as kind of COVID hit, I was in high school. I was a young kid, and I was by no means that rejecting my faith, but I just wasn't involved with it the way I should have been. And through that I felt a lot of despair, loneliness, stuff like that, only because I didn't have my core beliefs and values in the center of who I was. Which was something that I needed to get back on track with my faith. And I'm glad that I took it and learned from it, instead of kind of going down that path of just kind of not caring and doing what I wanted to and stuff like that. And from all through high school and kind of getting into college, even my first year of college when I went to church every Sunday, I wrestled with God a lot. Uh, I didn't know exactly what he wanted me to do, and I thought I knew it was best for me, and wanted to do what I wanted to do, which is essentially the root of, that kind of confusion and, the despair part of not knowing where you stand and not having your core values true to yourself. Which is, I've gone back, and I'd like to put out a disclaimer that I am by no means a perfect guy. I'm a sinner, and I've made plenty of mistakes, just as I know of I think we all
Absolutely. We
are.
all do.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure. And I'm really happy that I had people like my dad, and my uncle Mike, who I'll talk about in a little bit, and a lot of positive male role models to keep me on track with that stuff and hold our values to a very high standard. Because I think without the values that were given to me and the my faith and the path that you know I need to go on to be a better person and do the right thing, all the time, that's having those positive male role models was huge for me. Like I said, my old man, even my brothers, like one of my brother was my older brother Evan. He is my sponsor for my confirmation. So
Oh, wow.
it's yeah. So
Yeah.
stuff like that has been rooted in my family for
Yeah.
from my brothers to my dad to my uncles, stuff like that. Uh,
Yeah, that's fantastic.
yeah,
And I think you found out at an early stage of life, you're a young man, on your journey in life, and you've already encountered some adversities in your life, like you mentioned, parents getting divorced is a tough thing for a young child. And getting to college, transitioning from high school to college, and then getting to Indiana, playing there, and then
yeah,
deciding, a transition from Indiana to Iowa State. These are all, stressors and adversities in life. And again, this is just my personal feelings. And I think you and I can agree on this, that faith can help you with these things. And you're going to find as you progress in your life, and I'm sure your father and your uncle, have shared this with you, that if you get into a career, whether it's law enforcement or, who knows, maybe you're going to end up in the NFL. You don't know what the future holds for an individual. You're always going to encounter adversities in life. And having that strong family bond and having that faith to rely on is super beneficial for individuals as they journey through life.
yeah. I think so too. And it's you mentioned adversity. Getting into college, and things with making the change from high school to college, and stuff like that was obviously pretty difficult for anyone. But
Right.
I believe my first 2 weeks of making the transfer from high school to college and getting there that summer, I had my grandma passed away, and one of my heroes, my aunt, she also passed away within 2 weeks of each other. The time I went to college, and I was dropped off at a dorm room with no one I really knew. I wasn't really close with anybody. Even that for that whole summer, I was getting to know
Right.
everybody and really just honing in on football because that's all I had to work on. We had one online class that didn't take up much time of my day, so handling that adversity, that was a huge turning point in seeing I didn't know who to lean on. My dad wasn't there. My brothers weren't there, physically. Obviously, I could always, give them a ring and whatnot. But what I did know that was that there was a church 2 blocks away, 2, 3 blocks away from me that I would walk to every Sunday, which is one of the another turning points, knowing that there was always something there for me that helped me keep faith and keep hope that there was going to be something, I was going to get through it. And there's going to be something on the other side of this, which can apply to anything, me transferring, my parents splitting up, stuff like that. But that was definitely a huge thing that I had to realize that I couldn't do it alone. And it's not like my dad sure as hell wasn't going to drive 4 hours to come, talk about my
Right.
feelings, So it was something that he was always there for me, but I also knew that it was time to grow up and it was time to, take accountability. And it was something that was hard for me to get over, but I'm really happy I was able to turn to God instead of going down a road I sure didn't want to go down. So
Yeah. Yeah. You've made, so far in life, you've made some great decisions and are in a positive direction. So kind of springboarding off the positive direction you're taking, you're let's talk about this a little bit.
mhm.
Criminal justice, studying
Yeah.
criminal justice. Is that something, you referenced your Uncle Mike in law enforcement. At what point in Austin's life did you think, we've talked about sports, we've talked about football and getting to college. At what point in your life were you thinking about law enforcement as a career and then criminal justice in studies in college? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, I know. There's a very specific story I have from when I was 9 years old. I don't know why this stuck with me so much, but um, I remember it was one day in class, whatever grade I was in at the time. We were talking about what we wanted to do when we grew up, and everyone was saying basketball player, football player, this, that, and the other. And obviously I played football at the time, so football was always something that was huge to me. But I remember sitting to myself and thinking about what I wanted to do. And I've always looked up to my Uncle Mike, who was serving in the Marines and the infantry for, uh, was it '06 he got out or '06 he went in, somewhere around there.
Hmm.
And so he was always around for when I was growing up because he's not my dad's brother, he's my dad's best friend. And he was around, growing up. Actually, he was my neighbor at one point when I was living in Bloomingdale, my hometown. But he was also a police officer in Illinois. And hearing his story, and he wouldn't tell me like, all the cool stuff that he can tell me now, but
Right.
looking up to him and how well together he was as a man. And my dad would always tell me crazy stories about him, whether that's, you know, I know the reason he joined my this is my old man talking to me. The reason he joined was so a guy like my dad could stay home and raise a family. Which at the time, we were at war in the Middle East, and that hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought that was super powerful, and how selfless, my uncle was a great positive role model for me. And sitting there as a young kid, I remember thinking about this, and I had my hands on my head, and for whatever reason, I think my window was next to me, and I saw a shadow of, uh, I don't know why I remember this. I saw a shadow of the United States of America, like the country, and I
Hmm.
was like, that's got to be it. I'm like, that's got to be it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was like, kind of leading myself into high school. Kind of always being like, oh, I think I want to be a police officer. I think I want to be. And at the time, I was going super, super crazy on all my ideas. I want to be, a GI Joe, whatever that, whatever that might be.
Sure. I wanted to be a
Uh,
professional wrestler when I was a kid.
yeah, right. Growing up watching too much live PD and cops on the TV, you just didn't
Right.
know. Your mind changed every week. But
Right.
um, come high school, it was time to kind of really start thinking about that stuff. And I'm thinking, what can I do? Law enforcement really, interests me. And, I don't see myself being some sort of businessman, working behind a desk because, I wouldn't be able to fit under the desk. I wasn't,
Yeah, you're a pretty big dude. You're like what, 6'6", 320,
yeah,
325,
six
somewhere in
six
there?
320. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, that was something I had to think about, and I was forced to think about because I had to pick a major. And it was kind of a no-brainer for me, picking criminal justice. And something, another two other pieces of this was, my uncle Tom was a detective in Illinois. He
Hmm.
was another resource that I remember me and my dad and my little brother went over for dinner, and we just talked about, because I mentioned to my dad, I said I think criminal justice is something I want to do. And we talked to my Uncle Tom, and he told me, and my Uncle Mike too. I talked to him last year. We sat down, had dinner, and they told me, to be careful. And typically, it's a clear calling you get to do this kind of stuff. And it might not go my way. There's a lot of career options that I might go down and that I might like, and some I might not like, and stuff like that. And taking all that into consideration, it didn't matter to me what kind of politics I was going to run into. This is it was what I wanted to do since I was a kid. Uh, and picking criminal justice was, I didn't really know what. I mean, I knew the class I was going to be taking. I assumed I was going to be taking a lot of law classes and stuff like that, learn about the criminal justice system, which I have been. But something that I've really, really embraced and enjoyed during college and taking classes is the criminology aspect.
Hmm.
I took a class last semester that was juvenile delinquency. I've taken another class called it was like criminology and deviance, something like that. And every single time I go to sign up for classes, I try and pick if it matches with my track to graduate, I'm picking every criminology class that's available because that was I had no idea that I'd be studying stuff like that. I thought it was going to be a lot of process of law type of thing.
Right.
But the criminology stuff it's been awesome. Learning, the reasons of why people do what they do has been, and
Right.
I think you can probably speak to this a lot too, not only from your personal experiences, but kind of being in, having the experiences you had, that criminology stuff is to me is super intriguing.
Sure. Yeah, that stuff, the mindset of individuals and why they do things, the reasoning, the thought process they have is and can be so fascinating to study and to learn about because you're going to find when you do cross that threshold into the law enforcement world that a lot of what you do is analyze people. You speak with people, you speak with criminals, you discuss what they did, and you discuss why they did these things. So you're hitting the nail right on the head when you talk about those types of classes. And I'm a criminal justice instructor at a college here in Missouri, and I see and hear in your voice what I see and hear in the voices of many of my students that are serious about a career in law enforcement. They have that you can tell you're incredibly interested in learning this stuff and to finding out more about it. So I think that's an important aspect. You're on the right path for sure there. It's something that I just wanted to mention about criminal justice and the college that you're in right now, Iowa State University. I've always heard good things about the criminal justice program there. But in preparing for our conversation today, I dug into it a little bit and found out a couple things. I didn't realize this. Iowa State criminal justice program ranks number 17 in the nation by a study conducted by a program called University HQ. The criminal justice program is ranked within the top 10% in the entire United States by a survey and study conducted by a program called College Factual. So my point is, you personally, it doesn't seem like you could have landed in a better spot than Iowa State University for number one, criminal justice, but number two, a successful football program as well. So it's almost like you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, this is no doubt, a blessing for sure. I was making this change was, a really, a really big, part of academics and athletics going hand in hand and seeing how stuff was going to work out for me in the future. And with the experiences I've had at Indiana and, cherishing that, but also changing from, you know, uh, from that school to a school that's so productive in all those, areas, not to mention Coach Campbell and my offensive line coach, Coach Clanton, and all the support staff, Coach Hillman, stuff like that. All the people here in Ames, Iowa are some of the best people I've ever been around. Not only as far as sports go and athletics, but just in general. Like these guys care about everybody. And I've been at a school that, that might have not have been the case, especially looking out for guys who maybe are the scout team guys or the backup guys. Here in Ames, Iowa, everybody not only loves the Cyclones, but everyone who has a hand in the Cyclone program. It's been really, really cool to see how they've embraced me, and then how my coaches have, changed me not only as a football player because I've been learning a lot, but um, these coaches versus some of the other ones I've had in previous years. Coach Clanton and Coach Campbell truly, I could stop in their office anytime and talk about whatever, and they want to make sure that I'm doing good and I have everything I need, even though, I'm going to be 21 here in a month, and I'm a young man, but I've been, pretty independent the last couple of years of my life, but they're still, giving a helping hand whenever I need it. So
Yeah,
they're making this change has been amazing.
absolutely. And this is kind of me, this is an outsider's perspective, but being fortunate to have been, I'm close friends with Coach Hillman. We've known each other since we were kids. I've known him and his determination, and what a positive man Coach Hillman is. I know that personally, but from my perspective an outsider there in the couple visits I've had there at the football program, you're exactly right. That coaching staff has built an incredibly strong culture. And for somebody like me that just briefly observed it, that says a lot. That's a strong culture. There's a true sense of purpose with that football program. Accountability, mutual respect, and you hit the nail on the head. Coach Campbell, um, Coach Clanton, all these guys, they're developing you as players, not just physically and mentally, but they're developing you as young men that are going to be successful in society no matter what they do. So
Yeah,
I'm almost kind of jealous of you in the situation you're in because it's such a great opportunity.
for sure. Yeah, I'm truly blessed to be here, especially playing with my brother who also came from a school previously up at Wisconsin and coming here. Like he decided to transfer in the winter, and he had one semester left to graduate. And he wasn't sure where he was going to go. He really went into it blind because he knew he had to make the choice in order to get better as a player. And he, went into the portal and right after his first semester, and he didn't really have many bites. And the head coach up at Wisconsin, he said that he was able to come back and finish his school if that's what he decided to do for that last semester and transfer out after. But things didn't work out, and I want to say it was winding down. It was winding down the end of the transfer window, and Iowa State called him and gave an opportunity, which was completely out of left field. And it ended up working out for the better. And they thought he was going to play center, and they thought that he was going to. And Dylan wasn't sure what he was going to walk into as far as depth chart wise,
Hmm.
and he didn't have much game tape to show them because he was, struggling on the depth chart, getting bounced around, whatever the case may be. And he gets there, and the first year he's there, he starts because the the culture here is truly a fair, it's not politics. We care about everyone so much, and we also understand why some people are starting and why some are not. There's some people
Right.
who have things they need to get better on and develop, including myself. And we all respect the hell out of each other for that, making those hard decisions, but also the value of the team and their success is way more important than, individual success, which I think, everyone here in Iowa State really knows. And yeah, I had no idea that, I knew Iowa State had a good criminal justice program, but I did not know it was top, what was it, 17 in the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's impressive. And knowing that, I knew it was a good program, but knowing that, yeah, that kind of is the icing on the cake. Knowing that,
Yeah.
I'll be taking pretty good care of here.
This episode of the Right to Remain Silent True Crime Podcast is sponsored by Graphic Options. When it comes to custom screen printing, embroidery, and promotional gear, Brenda and her team are the real deal. I trust them with everything, whether it's a hat for my consulting business, a shirt for my podcast, or a large order of both. They've never let me down. They don't treat you like just another order. They listen, they care, and they make sure you walk away with something you're proud to put your name on. You have the right to great service and quality, and that's exactly what you'll get at Graphic Options. Visit graphicoptionsonline.com. That's graphicoptionsonline.com, and let them know the Right to Remain Silent podcast sent you.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I know you've got a number of classes to go before you would graduate with a criminal justice degree, but you said you found kind of like the psychology aspect of criminal justice, the criminology,
mhm.
very interesting. The question I I'm interested to know an answer to is since taking these classes in criminology and criminal justice, has your overall perspective on law enforcement evolved or changed since you've been studying criminal justice? Have you learned anything new that's kind of changed your thought process?
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit. I believe that I got into criminal justice for the right reasons, big, my values and what I believe in. Um, but as far as, learning of it kind of, as far as learning the criminology aspect, it not only did it teach me new things, but it reinstated some of the things that I knew but didn't notice, and the way some people behave, stuff like that. And then seeing case studies of certain scenarios of where, someone is, just really psychotic, and they make, reading case studies on making them, getting run-ins with the law and stuff like that. And then, like I mentioned, that juvenile delinquency class that
Right.
I took really gave me a cool insight into, the things kids, young men and young women kind of go through, and like we've all been through these changes. It's just the way some people are affected by external things, stuff like that. Whether that's stress in the home. Uh, one of the one of the things that I've seen a lot through my classes that have been remained consistent is, um, you know, the father figures within the home,
Hmm.
how big that is for young men to grow up to be good, good men and good people, even on their daughters. I've seen examples, and I've seen case studies of the better the more present and the more, the better the man that is the head of the household, the more that, young women realize what, how a good man is how a good man's supposed to act, and how they should be treated and respected and stuff like that. And I think at the very foundation of that is faith and good men. And like I mentioned before, is a lot. I've been fortunate to have a lot of positive male role models. My dad, my uncle, my brothers, even. And I think that is something that is certainly lacking, which is something I didn't notice because I've had so many positive male role models. And kind of seeing that and knowing that I am an able-bodied person, and I believe that I was put on this earth being an able-bodied person and having the values that I do have to do good things. I think that having that ability is something that I cannot, you know, I think there's really no other option for me, only because it's something I wanted to do for such a long time. And something else I'd like to mention is I was born on September 29th, which is, for those of you that don't know, it is the feast day of St. Michael the Archangel, patron saint of servicemen and women. And I don't believe in coincidences. And when I found that out, when, a couple years back, that really reinstated,
Wow.
why,
Yeah.
some of my aspirations. So yeah,
Yeah. That's something right there. So yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's a sign. You're right.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about, we talked about sports in high school, sports in college. We've talked adversities and criminal justice studies. Let's kind of, you want to, we've discussed your desire to work in law enforcement. Let's kind of talk a little bit about athletics, football in your situation, and law enforcement, maybe parallels kind of between the two. Um, from your perspective, um, are there any lessons that you've learned from playing football or playing sports that you think could apply to a future in law enforcement? And what I kind of mean is, for example, discipline. You need
Yeah.
discipline for sports to be successful. You definitely need discipline in law enforcement to be successful and safe. Teamwork, physical fitness. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think sports in general, whether that's football or, growing up, in high school, I loved wrestling. You kind of mentioned it, but the physical demands of, the job and sports, I think, are very kind of go hand in hand, because there's a standard of which you need to perform at. That, I think kind of goes without saying. And I think you can also truly relate to this, but playing offensive line in college, it's five guys that need to work as one, one unit. and being on the same page and truly paying great attention to detail is something that's been important to me, especially getting, raising the standard of my level of play and also, trying to play at an elite level has been super important. And I'd have to believe that, in a law enforcement career that remains the same. And then something that recently has been, reinstated in me through playing in practice and stuff like that, is, kind of if there was something negative that happened or, say on one play I made a mistake, you got to flush it and you got to move on. Uh, you know, you can't get hung up on stuff that happened maybe the previous day because I know that, in law enforcement, if you make a mistake like that and you're hung up on something, you might not be paying attention to what's in front of you and where your feet are, which could be a mistake that can lead to the harm of yourself or someone else.
Right.
Which is a lesson that is just a pain. It's a pain to learn, but it's something that I've been fortunate enough to play sports and experience it at a scenario where I'm my personal well being and someone else's personal well being isn't at stake. It's playing football has been giving me the opportunity for things like correcting mistakes and working as a team. To be able to do that on a playing field on a gridiron has been, you know, I've been able to learn those experiences that with stakes that aren't that high, which has been
Right.
obviously super helpful for me. Um, and kind of along with that, knowing how things go as far as having my coach and my boss, Coach Campbell, Coach Glenn, they're my boss, and whatever they say goes, and
Right.
that's how I roll. I've never been one to kind of question that, which is growing up, especially at Indiana, there's new generations of players who thought they ran the show, and typically those players got a very good got a rude awakening come them getting into college and stuff like that. And that's something that I've always kind of known. I've known my coaches or my boss and whatever they say goes, but also seeing how they influence me, listening to them, and how they influence my game and my play on the field. I know that the team is a lot more important than me, which is I'd assume would translate very well to law enforcement.
Oh, yes, 100%. 100%. Your your knowledge and thoughts are well beyond your current age of 20 years old. So, you're pretty spot on in what you're saying there. And just for instance, you're talking about split decision making in sports,
Yeah,
as an offensive lineman, you're going to have split decision making in law enforcement as well. And you are so right. Split decision making, if you make a mistake on the football field, it might result in a blown play or a lost game or something along those lines, which can be stressful and negative. But if you make the wrong split decision out in the field as a law enforcement officer, it could jeopardize your life or somebody else's. So,
yeah,
having said that, I would offer this that I think your experience as an athlete, especially a college athlete, is going to benefit you greatly. Because on a lesser scale, I played college football as well, and was in law enforcement for 30 years, and I found that my experience in athletics was incredibly beneficial to me as an athlete. Your boss is the head coach, your fellow officers or agents are your teammates, and you work, like you said, as a team together to pursue a common goal of success. So yeah, you're wise beyond your years when you're talking about that stuff. Um, as an old timer, now sometimes I think I am, other times I look in the mirror and I see my white beard and I'm like, yeah, I guess I am an old timer. As an old guy, I'm always interested in hearing a younger person's perspective or a younger person's viewpoint on law
hmm
enforcement. And, today in the news, in the media, social media, they provide a lot of negativity and oftentimes misinformation about the profession of law enforcement in general. I'm just curious as a young adult, As a young man, what's your personal view of law enforcement overall? And then to take that a step further, how about your peers? What do your folks your age as well think about law enforcement in general? Is that a fair question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually really glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention something about it earlier. Kind of slipped my mind, but yeah, the perception I've had of law enforcement growing up was my uncle was a great man. I'm like, every cop has to be like that. Like every guy, every law enforcement, you know, officer, stuff like that has to be like that. Like that was my perception. Moving into getting older and reading things, seeing a lot of different media on how the law enforcement is portrayed, and seeing negative, examples of law enforcement and negligence, stuff like that, and how amplified that was on media. Um, to my peers, I'll probably go into that first, but to my peers, I know that it's a very sticky situation to be in because a lot of criminal justice majors or a good chunk of criminal justice majors aren't going into law enforcement. They're just doing it as a pre-law, sort of deal.
Right.
And I remember having discussions in the criminal justice classes, because we would do that at least once a week. And I know that we would be presented a scenario and we would have to see if, whether the outcome of that and the decision making of, and these were, I'm sure most of these were made up, but if it was, appropriate for the officer to act like this, stuff like that. And I know getting a lot of feedback of my peers and how they talked about law enforcement, it's a lot of the mentality of they can never do anything right. And they're always arresting too many people, or they're not arresting enough people, or their presence isn't positive in the communities that certainly need it. And I remember having this discussion of how can we better portray police in communities or something like that. And it was talking a lot about community policing. And one of my peers in one of my classes said, they ought to have, maybe touch a truck or a barbecue. And high really, and we were talking about a high crime community. So take the South Side of Chicago for example.
Sure.
I'm like, I get where you're coming from. Like I think that stuff is super important, but if you have these kind of events and if you think everything's going to be, very easygoing like that in a very high crime situation where everyone's very hostile towards law enforcement, it's not gonna work. I know that if they ran something like that in the South Side of Chicago, no one's showing up. And if it's just the event's not going to be doable, stuff like that.
Right. Right.
And I think it's really hard for people my age to comprehend how hard it is being in law enforcement now because of either people disagree with you because of how the media portrays you, or there's this negative stereotype of how all police officers are bad just because there was a couple negligent situations and a couple bad apples that are bound to happen in any profession anywhere, throughout the
Right.
entire world. And being a criminal justice major, I kind of took pride in doing the right thing and bringing back true uh, true morals and values back to a place that has such negativity towards it, like law enforcement, stuff like that. And I look back to, the role models I had, like my Uncle Mike and my Uncle Tom, and, hearing all these stories of good police officers doing good things. And, my uncle told me a story that there was a girl who really had everything go south for her, and she was, holding a knife. And there was, her grandma was going to kick her out of the house. Everything was falling apart for her. It's this young girl who doesn't know what to do. And this was so impactful for me. But instead of, apprehending her and, manhandling her just to get the knife out of her hand, my uncle went up to her. He knew the girl from, prior situations, but he went up to her, he grabbed her wrists and then just gave her a hug. And my uncle is one of the, he's like a manly man. I've always seen him as that, as he's got no hair, and his hands, when I shake his hand, it feels like I'm putting my hand in a vice grip. That kind of
Yeah.
man. And
Yeah.
hearing that stuff from him, knowing that he's one of the men that I've aspired to be as far as law enforcement goes, and doing the right thing, and not being one of the gung ho law enforcement officers who just want to do it for the badge and the authority, is something that I've learned from the discussions I've had with my peers, and also the examples I've had from the role models I've had in my life. And like I said, the positive male role models can go on and on. And I'm truly
Yeah.
thankful for all those experiences and stories I've had shared to me.
Yeah, well, well said. And thank you for sharing that. That gives me hope. Oftentimes as an older law enforcement veteran, you kind of feel you used this word in the very beginning of our conversation, despair. Almost sometimes, you feel that you worry about the future of law enforcement and the people that are coming into it. But to hear a young man such as yourself to say such positive things about it, it lifts me up and gives me hope for the future of law enforcement that individuals like you are out there. And it's not just you, there's many people that are like-minded like you, and it's great to hear that. It's reassuring to know that. And I appreciate you and respect the direction in life that you're taking. And not only do I, but there's countless other people out there as well that you're going to find along the path of your career that also respect and appreciate you as well. So well said. Well said. Well,
Thank you. Yeah.
let me ask this. What are your thoughts on, when the time comes that you put football behind you, like we said, whether you stop your football career in college or whether you move on to the professional rankings, at some point your football career will come to an end and you'll then transition to law enforcement. What interests you specifically in law enforcement? What do you see yourself doing in that profession? I know many people that they want to do SWAT or they want to be a patrol officer and conduct traffic stops all the time. Or there's others that want to be a homicide detective or a narcotics investigator or undercover. What about law enforcement interests you, Austin, and what do you want to do?
Yeah. I've really, I used to change my mind a lot, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I was very
Correct.
open-minded to a lot of different ideas. But now kind of seeing, we have a team police officer who helps with mostly like the logistics of travel and making sure we're abiding by certain rules and whatnot. He's an active police officer in Iowa, is also part of the SWAT team, and I've seen him, also be another positive male role model yet again. But I see the way that the stuff that he does and the things that like the experiences he's shared with me a little bit. I think that, like I said, I mentioned this before, being able-bodied and being, the way I am and wanting to interact with people and, do as much good, like, do good things around my own community. I think something that really interests me is going into the sheriff's department, because I would kind of get the best of both worlds of being able to, cover, not just be a city cop, but also, being able to meet or interact with more people on a daily basis, which for me is huge. But also the amount of things I can branch off and do within the sheriff's department really intrigues me. Things like being part of a gang and violence unit really intrigues me. I've also thought about getting involved with a unit that would help, um, you know, the human trafficking side of,
Sure.
the evil in this country. I think
Right.
personally, I think human trafficking is the most purest form of evil. I think it's, seeing more about it, and even in some of my classes, it being mentioned how prominent it is today. I, that doing some good in that area has always, kind of struck a little bit of a spark with me. But definitely only because the versatility of the sheriff's department would be the reason why I think right now that's where I'm kind of leaning. and I can also be a cop anywhere. I can do
Right.
that and back in Illinois, back here in Iowa. I can go back to Indiana if I wanted to. But then again, I'm sure I'll still change my mind and be open to a lot of things. So as of right now, though, I think that's what I'm kind of intrigued on.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds fascinating, and you're right. Go into it open-minded and see what is out there. Go pursue what you're interested in, but yet uh keep an open mind to other things out there, because you might get out there and you want to do and while you're doing A aspect, you might see B, and like, hey, that's kind of cool. I want to learn about that. So I would encourage that. And I would say this as well. When I started out in law enforcement, I started at a sheriff's department. That's where I started, my very first job ever. And to this day, to today is the date of us talking about this, I still have friends that work at that same sheriff's department, or they retired from that sheriff's department after working there an entire career. And they were so glad that they did that. So, that's good that you kind of have a direction that you're interested in, and that's a positive thing. So,
Yeah,
I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see a young man, preparing for a career and essentially getting ready for liftoff. You know what I mean? At some
yeah,
point, you're going to launch into that career, and I'm excited for you. So, good luck with that.
yes.
Let me
Thank you.
let me yeah, absolutely. Let me, I'd like to talk a little bit about the term. I hate this term, but I don't know any other way to use it. Role model.
Hmm.
I think in today's society it's misused and it's misdirected and misguided.
Yeah.
It's thrown around a lot,
Hmm.
and it's often directed at high-paid professional athletes. It's often paid to Hollywood celebrities. But in reality, I personally think that true role models are people like you, people like your brother Dylan, other players on your team, Rocco. The list could go on just in your world of on your team. These are people that are hardworking, faith-based, dedicated to what they're doing, and they're committed to their goals, both on and off the field. And I think a lot of younger athletes, grade school athletes, high school athletes, look up to people like you. And I don't know if you realize that, but they do. And what really drove that point home for me was on my most recent visit up there to Iowa State. I had my two children with me, and you were kind enough to take time out of your day, like you were working, uh, practicing football, conditioning, working out, but you took 10, 20 minutes out of your day and you spoke to them. You stood there eye to eye. Well, you're much taller than them, but you stood there, face to face and spoke to them and answered their questions and talked to them about school, the importance of school, the importance of sports. Um, and I just want to let you know, I'm kind of rambling here, but I want to let you know that in the grand scheme of things, when people think of role models, it's individuals like you. Um, so I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing in that aspect. And I want to ask you a question about that, role models.
Yeah.
What young people that may have listened to our conversation today, what message do you hope that they might take away from listening to your conversation today? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Like dedication, persistence, that type of thing.
yeah. I would say if there was one thing that I would, even maybe my younger self listening to this, um, I would say it wouldn't have anything to do with sports and it wouldn't have anything to do with maybe a career path, but anchoring yourself and holding true to your own values and your own morals and the standards you have for yourself, which is things like hard work and, hanging around the right people and doing the next right thing the best you can because we're all going to make mistakes. I believe that is the, the truly the biggest thing that will get you far and has gotten me far because the times where I was on top of my own goals and aspirations and trying to do the right thing and doing, the things I was supposed to be doing versus, maybe hanging around the wrong people. That was when I had my most gains, one would say. Um, so I think it would really have nothing to do with sports at all. Sure, sports are, a place where you can put those things to work. A strong work ethic will also get you far. But as far as something that could blanket over anything, it would be staying true to the morals that you've set for yourself and other people have helped set for you because maybe you didn't know any better.
Yeah, that's strong. That is some positive advice and great suggestions for people. So I appreciate you sharing that, Austin.
Yeah,
Let me hey, this is kind of an interesting, I think people get a kick out of this next thing we're going to talk about here. I
yeah,
want to bounce some questions off of you, kind of like I'm going to call it a rapid fire questions for you,
yep.
just to kind of see what your thoughts are. So if you're ready, I'm going to bounce some questions off you.
I'm ready. Yep.
All right, let's do this. So, what's your favorite law enforcement movie or TV show?
Ooh. Um, TV show would have to be the first thing that hit my mind was Live PD, only because if I'm bored, I'm probably watching that. And then the Let's Be Cops. That's probably my favorite law enforcement movie. Yeah.
All right, good choice. Okay. Pregame hype song. Do you have one? Do you have a favorite?
Um, I like some Pantera. But then pregame, I'm also trying to not to psych myself out too much. So I listen to a lot of. I don't know if you're familiar with Colton Wall. He's a pretty popular country guy now,
Yeah.
very laid back, deep voice. So I listen to a lot of country, believe it or not.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
Hey, I love the Pantera answer. I saw them
yeah.
in concert about a year ago.
Oh, did you? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
All right. Hey, I think you might have answered this. So, a dream law enforcement job. It sounds like the sheriff's department type of scenario. Would that be fair?
Yeah, sheriff's department, some sort of gang and violence unit, maybe SWAT team, stuff like that.
All right. How many calories do you intake during a training day average? Any way to tell?
Yeah, I have a pretty good outline of how much I should eat every day, especially with practice going on. It ranges from 5 to 6 thousand calories a day, about 5 to 6 meals, and then a lot of protein shakes, a lot of snacks outside of that. But yeah, it's a
All
full time
right.
job. Yeah,
All
it's a
right.
full time job.
All right. So, best advice you've ever received concerning football?
When in doubt, resort to violence.
There you
Yeah,
go. There
to
you
be
go.
honest,
Good
and
one.
and also to always believe and have faith that within the game of football, the physical part and the brutality of man, my coach once put it to me, was something that will take you far. Because if maybe you're not in tune with the scheme, or maybe if you're not sure on what to do in a certain play, if you take an educated guess, you hit someone real hard. Typically, they're not going to get mad at you.
There you go. Hey, man,
Yeah,
that's awesome. A coach that I will not name when I was up there described your brother as a mauler. So I think that applies to what you just said right there.
yeah, yeah,
All right. You're from you're from the St. Charles, Illinois area. So I
yep.
think this is a fair question. What's the best pizza in the Chicagoland area?
Luminati's. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that that's listening, but Luminati's is deep dish Chicago style pizza. There's two major ones. One's Giordano's, the other one's Luminati's, but the crust from Luminati's is by
All
far
right, I'm gonna have to
superior.
try that. I was a Giordano's guy. I lived up there for years.
Okay.
And a little side note, my first assignment as a federal agent was Chicago, and I had never had deep dish pizza. So when I moved up there, I'm like, that's the first thing I'm gonna do. I
Yep.
went to
Yeah.
go pick up a deep dish pizza and paid for it and picked it up off the counter. I'm like, Holy smokes, this is heavy. What is in this? It was delicious, man.
Yeah, that's some good stuff up there. Yeah.
All right, so last question. Who would win in an arm wrestling contest between you and your brother Dylan?
Oh, it might. I don't know. I don't know. I have messed up shoulders. I have sore
Okay.
shoulders. But
All right.
as far as weightlifting goes, I'm better than he is upper body wise. I have a bigger bench. But lower body, he's a better squatter than I am.
All right.
So I might have the upper hand in that one, to be honest with you.
All right, fair enough. We'll take that.
Yeah.
How can listeners today, if they want to learn a little bit more about Austin or something along those lines, how can they kind of keep in touch with you? Do you have a social media or a handle or
Yeah, 72 Austin Barrett is my Instagram handle. You can see a lot of my posts from there. Most of them are all of them about football or my brothers, or maybe some hunting. But
all
yeah,
right.
that and then I have a bunch of links on there that you can get to my influencer website, which helps with maybe some Iowa State gear that you might want to buy, or I'm sure I have my brother in half my posts. So if you're interested about getting to know more of him and what he's doing and his career in football, I'm sure you can find him there too. So
Awesome. Yeah, I would highly encourage that. Going to the influxermerch.com to get that swag and jerseys and stuff for Iowa State, you, your brother, the other players. So yeah. And then, I would also I'd like to mention also for listeners that want to find out more about Iowa State University football, and the 2025 schedule, go to cyclones.com and, find the football link and you'll learn so much more about the team. So before we wrap it up for the day, Austin, is there anything you think we should circle back on or touch on, or do you have any final thoughts or advice you'd like to mention to people out there, or do you think we pretty much covered things?
yeah, I mean, I think we've done the topics we've covered have not only been something that I definitely want to hit on, and it's something that maybe you've experienced personally that I might reiterate to you and stuff like that. But I've truly enjoyed having being able to come on your show, and I've been a fan ever since the day I met you and you introduced me to the podcast. Some of the guests I've seen on other podcasts too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm super grateful for the opportunity to do this. And Jim, thanks again for having me.
Certainly, man. Hey, the pleasure is all mine. Like, I am serious. I'm so honored to have, like I said in the very, very beginning, to have had this conversation with you. I'm so honored that you took the time out of your busy schedule up there and to talk today and share a little bit about you, about your athletic career, about your academics, your studies, and your desire to be a law enforcement officer out there. And like I said, it's very uplifting to hear from young people like you, that are going to be the future ranks of law enforcement. So, Austin, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. And to the I'm sure my my old man will be watching this, but make sure to subscribe. This podcast has been kind of new, and
Yeah,
when I
it is.
discovered it, I know that it was a lot of the familiar content I've been already been watching, and being able to branch out and now your podcast and seeing that as well has been great, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Thank you both on the field this season. I'll be looking for you. My kids are going to be wearing your jersey this season, so they're stoked about it as well. Good luck in the classroom and in your criminal justice studies. All right.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And go Cyclones.
Yep, absolutely. And to my listeners out there, as usual, I just simply want to thank you for listening and remind you to please like, follow, share, subscribe my social media so I can bring you top caliber guests like Austin Barrett to the show to share his story. So thank you to my listeners as well. And everybody stay safe out there. The Right to Remain Silent podcast is brought to you by Streetwise 360 Studios. I would like to again thank today's guest for sharing the story right here on the podcast. Please remember to like, follow, share, and recommend us so that I can continue to bring you high caliber guests sharing their experiences, just like we heard today. If your law enforcement agency is interested in training provided by Streetwise 360, or if you know someone that has an interesting law enforcement story to share, please contact me via the website, www.streetwise-360.com, www.streetwise-360.com.